Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. The cries from the old well won't stop. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Emily Parker eased her sedan over the cracked asphalt of the desolate road leading into the heart of Nettlewood, a small, forgotten town hidden deep within the American countryside. The fading sun cast long shadows over the deserted streets, giving the town an almost spectral quality. Old storefronts with peeling paint and boarded-up windows lined the road, each one a silent testament to better days long past. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, mingling with the faint aroma of pine from the nearby forest. Emily's car sputtered as it chugged up the incline to the edge of town, where a large, gnarled oak tree stood sentinel. Beneath its sprawling branches, she could make out the silhouette of an old well, partially obscured by overgrowth. The well had become a local legend, whispered about in hushed tones by the few townsfolk who still ventured out. Its reputation for eerie cries at night and the mysterious disappearances connected to it had intrigued Emily for months. She was here to uncover the truth behind these tales for her latest article, hoping to shed light on what seemed to be a relic of a bygone era, steeped in myth and mystery. Emily parked her car and stepped out, her boots crunching on the gravel. The forest loomed ahead, its dense foliage almost seeming to swallow the light. The cries she'd heard about were more than just rumors. They were unsettling enough to make her skin crawl, and she could almost hear them now, a distant echo that made her heart race. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the cries grew louder, more distinct, a mournful wail that cut through the evening stillness. The path narrowed, overgrown with thorny brambles that snagged at her clothing. Finally, she emerged into a small clearing where the old well stood, half buried under a blanket of fallen leaves and creeping vines. The well's stone walls were cracked and weathered, its once sturdy structure now giving way to the relentless march of time. Emily's flashlight illuminated the moss-covered stones, casting eerie shadows on the surrounding trees. She crouched beside the well, peering into its dark depths. A chill ran down her spine as she imagined the endless void beneath. Nearby, she found a weathered journal buried beneath a pile of rotting leaves. The leather cover was cracked, and the pages were yellowed with age. Emily opened it carefully, revealing scrawled notes and drawings that hinted at something sinister. The entries spoke of restless spirits and a curse tied to the well, detailing strange occurrences and local legends. Her fingers trembled as she read the last entry, which warned of a malevolent force lying in wait, hungry for those who dared to uncover its secrets. Emily's pulse quickened as she closed the journal, her mind racing with the implications. The well's cries, once dismissed as folklore, now seemed to take on a new, chilling significance. As night began to fall, Emily felt a growing sense of unease. The well's sinister allure was undeniable, and she knew that her investigation was only just beginning. The darkness of the forest pressed in around her, and with each step she took away from the well, the cries grew fainter, but no less disturbing. Chapter 2. The First Night. Emily Parker's breath formed misty puffs in the cool evening air as she set up her camp near the old well. The forest around her was silent, except for the distant, mournful cries emanating from the well, growing louder with the approach of night. She unpacked her gear with methodical precision, her mind racing through the disturbing revelations from the journal she'd had found. As she worked, Emily's thoughts drifted back to the loss that had driven her to this isolated corner of the world. 2 years ago, her younger brother had vanished without a trace. Despite an extensive search and numerous dead-end leads, The case had gone cold. The unresolved mystery haunted her, pushing her to investigate the unknown and the supernatural, hoping that uncovering the truth might help her find closure. The sky darkened rapidly, and the temperature dropped as the sun disappeared behind the trees. Emily lit a small campfire to ward off the chill, its flickering flames casting long dancing shadows that seemed to merge with the forest. She set up her camera and voice recorder, determined to capture any evidence of the phenomena described in the old journal. As the first stars appeared, the cries from the well became almost unbearable. They were no longer mere whispers, but resonated with an eerie intensity that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Emily tried to focus on her work, but the sounds were unnervingly persistent, punctuating the silence of the forest. Around midnight, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the campfire, plunging her into darkness. Emily's flashlight barely pierced the inky blackness as she scrambled to relight the fire. A chill crept up her spine, and she felt a presence, something unseen, watching her from the darkness. Her flashlight beam flickered, revealing fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures moving just beyond the edge of the clearing. Disembodied whispers began to weave through the trees, their source impossible to pinpoint. Emily strained to understand the murmurs, but the words were incoherent, blending into a disquieting symphony of dread. Her camera's night vision function caught strange, darting shapes, but each time she tried to focus on them, they vanished. She shivered as she felt a cold breath on the back of her neck. Spinning around, Emily saw nothing but darkness, the whispers now a soft, insistent hum that filled the air. She swallowed hard, her fear mingling with determination. The well, and whatever haunted it, seemed to be reaching out to her, pulling her into its sinister embrace. Desperate to remain calm, Emily reviewed her notes and recordings. Each sound and shadow was more unsettling than the last. The well's cries seemed to carry a message, an unspoken warning or a call to the damned. Emily realized, with a sinking feeling, that the malevolent force she had hoped to uncover was far more real and terrifying than she had imagined. As the night wore on, Emily's exhaustion gave way to an unsettling sense of dread. The well's cries echoed through the darkness, and the forest seemed to close in around her. She knew she was on the brink of uncovering something dark and profound. But as the shadows lengthened and the whispers grew louder, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn into something far beyond her control. Chapter 3: Unveiling the Past. Morning light filtered weakly through the dense forest canopy, casting a gray pallor over Emily Parker's makeshift camp. The remnants of her overnight vigil were scattered around her: an empty coffee cup, a flashlight, and a tattered blanket. Exhausted but resolute, Emily packed up her equipment, her thoughts still clouded by the night's unsettling experiences. Determined to uncover more about the well, Emily made her way to the town's small, dilapidated library. The building's faded facade and dusty windows suggested it hadn't seen much use in years. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the scent of old paper and mildew. Emily approached the librarian, an elderly woman with a wary eye, and inquired about historical records related to the well. The librarian's eyes narrowed. "You're the one who's been poking around that old well," she said, her voice heavy with skepticism. "That place should be left alone. Bad things come from meddling in the past." Emily nodded, but her determination was unwavering. "I need to understand what happened here. People have gone missing, and the well's connected to it." With a reluctant sigh, the librarian directed Emily to the town's archives, a cluttered room filled with dusty ledgers and yellowing newspapers. Emily pored over documents, searching for clues. Hours passed, and just as she was about to give up, she stumbled upon a series of articles detailing a family, the Millers, who had vanished under mysterious circumstances in the late 1800s. The reports were vague, mentioning only that the family had been last seen near the well before disappearing without a trace. Eyewitnesses spoke of strange lights and noises coming from the forest, but no concrete evidence was ever found. The case had remained unsolved, and the family was presumed dead. Emily's curiosity was piqued. She knew there had to be more to the story. Her next stop was the town's reclusive historian, a man named Edgar Blackwood, rumored to know more about the town's dark past than anyone else. She found his home at the edge of town, a crumbling Victorian mansion shrouded in overgrown ivy. Edgar, a gaunt figure with piercing eyes, opened the door reluctantly. His gaze was guarded as Emily introduced herself and requested information about the Millers. Edgar's expression darkened. "Some things are better left buried," he said curtly. "The well holds secrets best left undisturbed. It's cursed, and tampering with it will only bring misfortune." Emily pressed him for more details, but Edgar's refusal was adamant. Frustrated, she left his home with no more information than she had entered with. Undeterred, Emily returned to the well that evening. As she dug through the underbrush near its base, she discovered a hidden entrance partially concealed by fallen branches. With some effort, she managed to pry open a concealed door, revealing a small underground chamber. Inside, she found disturbing artifacts, old, tattered clothing, faded photographs, and strange symbols etched into the walls. On a dusty table lay a parchment with a cryptic message: "Restless souls, bound by the darkness of the well, shall find no peace." A chill ran down Emily's spine as she realized the full scope of what she had uncovered. The well was more than a mere relic. It was a gateway to something profoundly dark and malevolent. The artifacts and message hinted at a deeper, more disturbing connection to the mysterious disappearances and the malevolent force that had haunted her nights. Emily knew she had only scratched the surface of a much darker mystery. Chapter 4. The haunting intensifies. The air in Nettlewood had grown thick with an oppressive stillness that mirrored Emily Parker's troubled mind. The discovery of the hidden chamber near the well had left her unsettled, but it was the nightmares that truly began to fray her nerves. Each night, sleep was plagued by visions of shadowy figures writhing in agony, their faces contorted in silent screams. One morning, Emily woke with a start, her heart racing and sweat clinging to her skin. The dream had been so vivid, an endless tunnel, the cries of the vanished Millers echoing around her. She could still feel the icy grip of unseen hands on her shoulders. The hallucinations had begun to bleed into her waking life. Shadows seemed to move at the edge of her vision, and the cries from the well grew louder, more insistent, echoing in her mind. The townsfolk had grown increasingly wary of her presence. Whispers followed her wherever she went, and their once polite demeanor had turned into open hostility. At the local diner, Emily overheard a conversation between two residents. "She's gone off the deep end, meddling with things that ought to be left alone," one said. "She's asking for trouble," the other replied. "We warned her. No good will come of this." Emily's isolation was palpable. Even her close friend, Sarah, who had been supportive from the beginning, began to express concern. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Sarah said over the phone, her voice tinged with worry. "You're losing sleep, and you're not yourself. Maybe it's time to back off." Emily brushed off Sarah's concerns. "I'm close to understanding what's really going on here. I need to see this through." But the more Emily delved into the well's mysteries, the more she felt the walls closing in. Her research had become an obsession, consuming every waking moment. She found herself wandering the forest at night, driven by an unshakable compulsion to understand the well's dark influence. The well itself seemed to resonate with a malevolent energy. It was as if it fed off her fear and desperation. One evening, as she approached the well, a frigid gust of wind slammed into her, nearly knocking her off her feet. The forest fell into an unnatural silence, and the well's cries seemed to echo with a mocking tone. Emily's reflection in the well's murky surface was distorted, the shadows warping into grotesque shapes that mirrored her inner turmoil. She reached out, but the coldness of the water made her withdraw in fear. That night, as Emily lay in her rented cabin, the hallucinations grew more severe. She could hear whispers just beyond her hearing, the words indecipherable but filled with menace. She saw shadowy figures in the corners of her room, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. She questioned her sanity, wondering if the well was more than just a source of local legend. It was becoming a force that threatened to consume her. Emily sat up in bed, heart pounding, and stared at the darkness around her. The sense of being watched was overwhelming. She felt trapped between reality and nightmare, her own fears blending with the supernatural elements she was desperately trying to uncover. Her quest for the truth was leading her into a darkness far deeper than she had anticipated, and she wasn't sure if she would be able to find her way back. Chapter 5. Secrets Revealed. The relentless cries from the well had turned into a cacophony that pierced Emily Parker's thoughts day and night. With every passing moment, the line between her nightmares and reality blurred. The malevolent energy she felt was no longer just an unsettling presence. It was an active force that seemed to be closing in on her. She could almost hear its whispers, feel its chill, and sense its rage. Driven by a mounting desperation, Emily returned to the hidden chamber she had discovered earlier. She pored over the artifacts, desperately seeking any clue that might explain the well's sinister influence. Amid the debris, she found an ancient book, its pages brittle and stained. The text, written in a mix of archaic script and disturbing illustrations, detailed a ritual gone catastrophically wrong. The book described a ceremony intended to bind malevolent spirits and keep them from harming the living. Instead, the ritual had failed, trapping the spirits in the well and leaving them to rage against their confinement. Emily's eyes widened as she read about the spirits' desire for vengeance, a vengeance that extended to anyone who disturbed their prison. As she deciphered the text, Emily felt an icy chill creep up her spine. The spirits weren't just malevolent. They were tormented souls seeking release from their suffering. Cries she had heard were their desperate pleas for freedom, their anguish echoing through the well's dark depths. Emily was suddenly struck by a painful realization. Her own grief and sense of unresolved guilt over her brother's disappearance mirrored the pain of these trapped spirits. She had been so consumed by her search for answers that she hadn't acknowledged her own emotional scars. The well's cries weren't just random noises. They were echoes of her own unresolved pain and loss, magnified and intertwined with the spirit's suffering. Her epiphany was abruptly interrupted as the room's atmosphere changed. The temperature dropped sharply, and the shadows seemed to pulse with an unnatural life of their own. The spirits were growing more aggressive. The previously subtle signs of their presence now became violent and overt. Emily's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The whispers morphed into agonized screams, and the air was thick with an oppressive force. Objects in the chamber began to levitate, crashing to the ground as if thrown by unseen hands. Emily's breath came in short, sharp gasps as she tried to steady her nerves. In a frenzy, she attempted to use the knowledge from the book to perform a counter-ritual, hoping to appease the spirits and break the curse. Her hands trembled as she recited the ancient incantations, her voice barely audible over the rising storm of supernatural energy. The well's cries reached a deafening crescendo, and Emily could feel the malevolent force pressing against her, a tangible pressure that seemed to claw at her very soul. As the ritual reached its climax, Emily felt a surge of intense emotion. Her own grief, her brother's memory, and the spirit's anguish converged into a powerful wave of sorrow and rage. The chamber was a maelstrom of spiritual energy, and Emily faced the darkness head-on, driven by a mixture of fear and resolve. The encounter left her physically and emotionally drained. The well's cries eventually subsided, replaced by a haunting silence that felt almost as menacing. Emily collapsed, exhausted and shaken, knowing that she had come face to face with the well's darkest secrets. The spirit's vengeance had been temporarily subdued, but the echoes of their suffering and her own unresolved grief remained, leaving Emily to grapple with the profound implications of what she had learned. Chapter 6: The Confrontation. The oppressive silence that followed the chaotic storm of spiritual energy was heavy and foreboding. Emily Parker, bruised and exhausted, sat amidst the wreckage of the hidden chamber, her breath ragged and her hands trembling. The well's cries had quieted to a low, ominous murmur, but the malevolent presence had not dissipated entirely. She knew that the temporary reprieve would not last long. Determined to end the curse, once and for all, Emily prepared for the ritual described in the ancient journal she had found. The journal's pages detailed a complex ceremony designed to appease the spirits and break their hold over the well. The process was intricate and required specific items: a vial of salt, an ancient talisman, a candle infused with sage, and a vial of purified water. Each item represented a counter to the dark forces that bound spirits. Emily gathered the necessary components with a mixture of urgency and dread. Her hands worked efficiently, despite her exhaustion, as she prepared a ritual circle near the well's edge. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual night sounds stifled by an eerie quiet. As she arranged the items within the circle and began to chant the incantations from the journal, the air grew colder and the atmosphere became charged with tension. The well's presence began to manifest in disturbing ways. Shadows twisted and writhed, coalescing into menacing shapes that hovered just beyond the edge of the circle. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as the ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with dark energy. The malevolent force was no longer a mere whisper in the dark. It had become a tangible entity, a roaring tempest of supernatural fury. Emily continued the chant, her voice wavering but resolute. The spirits appeared as spectral figures, their faces distorted by rage and despair. They reached out toward her with ghostly hands, their mournful wails mingling with the wind. The well's dark influence intensified, causing the surrounding trees to bend and sway violently, as though reacting to the spiritual struggle. A powerful gust of wind ripped through the forest, extinguishing the sage candle and sending the ritual items scattering. Emily fought to keep her focus, scrambling to relight the candle and maintain the circle's integrity. The spirit's aggression grew fiercer. One of them, a wraith-like figure with hollow eyes, seemed to be the leader, its presence more forceful than the others. In a desperate bid to complete the ritual, Emily grabbed the talisman and held it aloft, reciting the final, crucial lines of the incantation. The talisman began to glow with a fierce light, casting an ethereal glow around the ritual circle. The spirits recoiled from the light, their forms flickering and distorting. With a final, defiant cry, Emily completed the ritual. The talisman's light flared brightly, and a wave of energy surged through the air, pushing back against the malevolent force. The spirits let out a collective, anguished wail before being pulled back into the well, their forms dissolving into the darkness. The well itself seemed to heave and shudder, the cries fading to a whisper before being silenced entirely. As the last echoes of the spirits' wails disappeared, Emily collapsed to her knees, the weight of the confrontation leaving her drained and disoriented. Forest returned to its natural state, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Emily looked at the now quiet well, knowing that the battle had been won, but unsure of what lay ahead. She had faced the well's dark forces and survived, but the scars of the confrontation, both physical and emotional, would remain. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. The first light of dawn filtered through the dense canopy, casting a soft, golden glow over the forest. Emily Parker sat at the edge of the well, her body heavy with exhaustion, her mind clouded with both relief and lingering dread. The confrontation had left her physically battered, but the silence that now enveloped the forest was a welcome change from the cacophony of malevolent cries. As the sun rose higher, Emily saw that the well's once tumultuous surface was now eerily calm. The dark, swirling energy had dissipated, and the oppressive weight that had hung over the town seemed lighter. Yet, despite the temporary peace, Emily knew that the well's malevolence had not been entirely eradicated. The ritual had weakened its power, but the well remained a dormant threat, its dark influence merely subdued rather than destroyed. Emily trudged back to the small town, her thoughts heavy. The townspeople, who had watched her efforts from a distance, greeted her with a mixture of apprehension and tentative relief. The air was lighter now, but the shadows of their past sorrows lingered. Conversations about the well's curse had quieted, but an undercurrent of unease still rippled through the community. In the solitude of her temporary lodging, Emily reflected on the journey that had led her here. She had sought to uncover the truth, driven by personal loss and professional curiosity. The well's dark history had intertwined with her own grief, and the cost of revealing its secrets had been steep. She looked out the window at the peaceful morning scene, feeling the weight of her actions. The town was beginning to heal, but the scars of the past were not so easily erased. As Emily packed her belongings, preparing to leave the town behind, she received a small, weathered envelope slid under her door. Its edges were frayed, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. With a sense of foreboding, she opened it. Inside was a single, cryptic note: "The darkness is patient. It waits for the unwary." A chill ran down Emily's spine. The message was a stark reminder that the well's curse was not entirely vanquished. It was a haunting reminder that, while the immediate threat had been subdued, the darkness was still present, lurking just beyond the veil of normalcy. She had hoped for a clean resolution, but instead she was left with a lingering sense of unease. Emily took one last look at the town she had come to know, now bathed in the soft morning light. The past had left its mark on the town and on her. As she drove away, the note remained clenched in her hand, a chilling reminder of the darkness that might yet return. Chapter 8. The New Normal. Emily Parker drove down the winding road, the town receding in her rearview mirror, its silhouette becoming a distant blur. The morning light cast long shadows across the landscape, the air crisp and clean, but a heavy silence hung over her. The sense of normalcy she had once taken for granted felt profoundly altered by her experiences. She had uncovered the town's darkest secrets, faced malevolent forces, and emerged with scars both visible and unseen. Back in her city apartment, Emily sat at her desk, the well-worn journal open before her. The ritual and its aftermath felt like a lifetime ago, yet the weight of the well's curse seemed to linger just below the surface of her thoughts. As she typed the final paragraphs of her article, she found herself recounting the eerie events with a mixture of fascination and dread. Her investigation into the well had become more than just a story. It was a haunting journey that had tested her very sanity. The article, once published, quickly became a local sensation. Readers were captivated by the chilling details of the well and the supernatural occurrences Emily had documented. The story sparked intense curiosity and fear, reigniting interest in the dark legend that had long been buried. People spoke of the well with hushed voices, their fascination mingled with a healthy dose of trepidation. The town, now a subject of eerie fascination, had become a place where legends and reality intertwined in unsettling ways. Months later, Emily was alone in her apartment, organizing her notes and preparing for a book tour. As she flipped through a stack of letters from readers, she noticed something peculiar. A single envelope addressed to her in handwriting that was unmistakably old-fashioned and frayed at the edges. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it. Inside was a small, tarnished locket. The locket's design was reminiscent of an old-fashioned heirloom, but there was something unsettling about it, an inscription that read, "The curse endures." Emily's pulse quickened as she stared at the locket, a cold chill creeping up her spine. She glanced around her apartment, the familiar surroundings now feeling strangely foreign. The unsettling sensation that had lingered in her mind since leaving the town seemed to intensify. Had the well's dark influence followed her, or was it merely a figment of her imagination? As Emily placed the locket back in the envelope, a soft, rustling sound echoed through the apartment. Her gaze fell on the wall, where the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally. The room felt colder, and the silence seemed to carry a weight of its own. She shook off the feeling, attributing it to her overimagination. But as she turned off the lights and prepared for bed, the creeping sense of unease remained. The novel ends with Emily lying in the dark, her thoughts swirling with unanswered questions. The well's curse, it seemed, was not entirely vanquished. The locket, a chilling reminder of unresolved terror, hinted that the darkness she had faced might still be a part of her life. The story of the well and its malevolent influence continued to linger, leaving Emily and the readers with a haunting sense of uncertainty.